Okay, everyone. On behalf of the Sudanese Doctors Union of Ireland, we are glad to have Mr. Conor O'Connell with us today to present the interview skills course. This is an important skill that a lot of people will need to get on higher training program, on the basic surgical training program as well. We're glad to have Mr. O'Connell with us today. He's a recognized trainer of a lot of prestigious companies like Microsoft and Intel, and he also worked with the Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland. Without further ado, I'll let him start the interview skills course with you. During the course, I would like you to switch your video on if possible and switch your microphones off. Towards the end of the course, you will be allowed to ask questions, so you can take notes as you go along. My colleagues, Waleed Mohammed and Sarah Khalifa, will be taking note of people who want to ask questions, and they will direct the opportunity to each individual in turn. Is that okay? All right, Conor, I'll leave it up to you now.
Thank you. Okay.
Thanks very much.
Right then, so it is just 10 minutes past midday in Ireland, so it's good afternoon from Ireland, maybe good morning, or indeed good afternoon, good evening where you are. So it is very nice. If I had known that there was going to be so many people here, I'd have, worn my makeup or got my proper suit on. And, but anyway, here we are. It's Saturday, and it is a real pleasure to share with you. Now, let me just very quickly share some stuff on the screen. Oh, sorry, you'll need to enable me to share my screen because I'm not a host.
I'll enable you as a co-host.
Be a co-host.
As well, Conor. Let me, if I can find you. All right. Okay, good. You're here and you're a co-host now.
Excellent. Okay. So now let me now share my screen. Haha, right, here we go. Now, this will give you a little bit of background as to the approach here. But this is kind of important, so we'll put some context on it. So here is the news, right? I have a friend who has been my friend since we were about 6 years of age. His name is Dr. Frank Murray. Indeed, he is Professor Frank Murray, and he's a gastroenterologist up in Beaumont Hospital. He has been my friend since I was about 6 years of age. I was his best man. He was my best man. We've known each other a long, 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 long time, right? I work as you've just heard, I work a lot with corporate companies. I would be working with maybe Pfizer or with Intel or with Microsoft or with GlaxoSmithKline, whatever. But February 2006, my friend, Professor Frank Murray, called me and he said, do you do any stuff on interviews? And I said, well, not really, but I would sit on interview panels. Why do you ask? I said. Because he says, we have lots of young people who are up in the hospital. He says, they're young doctors. They're very smart, very clever. They all get, great points in their exams and they're super clever. But when it comes to interviews, he says, they're not much good at all. And the reason being is because they don't do a lot of interviews. But he says they reach a part of their career where interviewing is going to be very, very important. And Frank Murray says, a good interview will not get you the job, but a bad interview will lose you the job. So in other words, it's very important to be thinking about, how I prepare for the interview. So he said, we are putting some training together for the young doctors up in Beaumont, and would you be able to help? And I said, of course I would. So we did it. And since then, I have been doing a lot of interview training. Even this morning, I had 2 separate young doctors preparing for the higher specialist training. So this has been going for quite a while. Now, what's the message here? A lot of people are afraid of interviews. They see interviews as something very to be afraid of. It's room 101, it's the P45, it's like spiders, it's like snakes, it's to be terrified. It is not to be terrified. An interview is a chance to sell yourself. So what it is it is a selling exercise. You have to be able to show off and to be able to sell. And it is really important also to understand that as you're selling yourself, hold on a moment here. My slides have just decided that they're not moving ahead anymore. Everything about you makes an impression. And in fact, interviewers want to be impressed. If you've ever done interviewing, it's a long, slow, boring day. But if somebody comes in and is impressive, almost immediately you think, wow, this is the sort of person we want. So interviewers want to be impressed. Mention the features, sell the benefits. What we are talking about here is many doctors will come to interviews and say, oh, well, I qualified in 2013, and then I did my intern year in Beaumont Hospital, and then I applied for a scheme, and then I did, I did 6 months in Tullamore, and then I did 6 months cardiology, and then I did this. That is not really what it's all about. What we're really interested in is we're selling the sizzle, not the sausage. It's what you can do with all of this learning. What are your talents? What are the extra things that are going to make you different from all the other people? Time also is very short. HST interviews probably maybe a half an hour altogether. BST interviews sometimes just 10 minutes. So you need to be very quick and you need to go for it. But that means you need to be very clear. What do you want to say and how you're going to get the message across? So it is important not just to be saying all of the things that are on your CV. What you really want to do is to tell them the story and to sell yourself. Here's what I'm good at. Here's what I've been complimented on. Here's the things that I am already recognized as being particularly talented in doing. Okay, moving ahead. Preparing for the interview. Fail to prepare, prepare to fail. Update and edit your CV. Okay, I am not a CV person, but I am struck by how pernickety, if that's a word, how Frank Murray is very strict and structured about how he sees CVs. He likes to see it laid out in a perfect way. He likes to see no spelling mistakes. He likes to see it laid out in an order that he can follow and that is easy to follow. If he sees a spelling mistake or a layout mistake, he will throw it in the bin. He's really structured and pernickety. So I'm not a CV person. Other people can help you with that. But it is important to have it right. Now, what I also need to think about, however, is not just the upgrading and editing your CV, but also I need to, hang on a minute, I've noticed this sometimes on Zoom that my PowerPoint freezes up. So let me pause a moment here. I'm going to stop sharing this and I'm going to reload it and see if we can pop this onto the screen. It might make it easier. Right, upgrade and edit your CV. Now, research the organization, the department, the position. Absolutely. In other words, if you are going for some basic specialist training or you're going for higher specialist training, you really need to know what are they looking for? What is their list of things they are looking for? So in other words, research the position. Think about what the interviewers want. Anticipate the questions, which we will do and we will talk about later on in this presentation, and practice your answers, of course. The trick is to have a good idea what questions are likely to come at you and already be thinking about how do I want to structure my answers? How do I want to deliver this message across? And even silly things like how you'll get there. Don't be late. Don't be putting extra pressure on yourself. You know, get a taxi, arrive in plenty of time, have a cup of coffee, have a chance to relax, make sure that you're doing yourself your best favors in order to prepare for the interviewer. Now, respond to questions. You can anticipate most questions, and we will show you some of the questions then later on. Prepare your answers and practice them. Of course, that's what we're asking you to do here, and that's why we're getting you to think about this. There is a very interesting thing in communications, which is called the rule of three. And a lot of people tend to forget this sometimes when they're trying to put a communication together. The rule of three. Let me give you some examples. Veni, vidi, vici. I came, I saw, I conquered. Liberté, égalité, fraternité. life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Wear a mask, keep your distance, save lives. Good communication is usually around 3 different things. Why is that? Because that's what people can remember. So for example, if somebody talks to you at interview and says, you know, talk to us about your skills. Yes, you may have 15 different sort of skills that you are bringing, but here are 3 that I would like to refer to. Talk to us perhaps about your research. Yes, I've done many pieces of research or I've done many audits, but here are 3 that I would particularly like to zone in on. So you don't try and, you know, a lot of people think that if I have 15, that is better than having 11. No, it's not. 3 is all you need, but they need to be 3 good ones and they need to be 3 well explained. We will come back to that point in a few moments when I go through the questions later on. So the rule of 3. Even the sequence of your response in the rule of 3 is interesting. A lot of people sometimes will do 1 and then 2 and then 3. Actually, a better way to do it is 2, then 3, then 1. In other words, you finish with the most powerful one. You finish with the strongest one. And by finishing with the strongest one, what it does is it tees up the next question. It gets, you know, if you talk about, well, I've done research in 3 different areas. We've done one on patient waiting times, and we've done one on, you know, the application of the pharmaceuticals. And I've done a very interesting one then on interventional, you know, radiology or, you know, transesophageal, you know, echocardiograph. Oh, my goodness, have you done echocardiographs as well? Oh, tell us a bit more about that. What it does is by leaving it to last, it often tees up the next question. Then you're leading the dance. That's the most important thing. Doesn't always work, but it's useful. So the rule of 3. Dress code. Okay, now I am not a guru or I am not a fashion designer, but you all know this. You dress to fit in, conservative in style. Men, dark suit, pattern tie. You don't wear your Homer Simpson tie or your special, you know, I've been to Canada socks. No, you don't do that. You wear something that fits in. Women, obviously, as well, muted colors, you know, cover up, attention to hair, makeup, whatever it might be. But certainly, professional impact is what you want, and you do a final check before you go in. You want to make sure you look good. So that is most important. Moving on. Now, people will sometimes say to me, but Conor, I can be nervous. Yes, most people can be nervous. However, you don't want to look nervous. If any of you have ever watched TED Talks, the second most watched TED Talk of all time is by a Harvard professor called Amy Cuddy. Please write this down because it's worth watching. AMY Cuddy, Amy Cuddy. She's a professor in Harvard. And she has done a very powerful TED Talk on body language. And it's all about giving an impression of power, of credibility, of authority. And that's what you want to give in your interview. So it's really important to be aware of your body language. If you sit there, let me, for example, let me stop sharing this for a moment and let me just get myself onto the screen. But, you know, I can see myself on the screen now, but hopefully you can see me here. I have seen people going for interview and I've asked them questions. So, for example, give me your vision for palliative care in the North Dublin region for the next 5 years. This is somebody applying for a senior hospital position in palliative care. And this is what I saw. My vision for palliative care. If I see somebody across the table who looks like that, I am not that interested in their vision for palliative care for the North Dublin region because they look like a child. They look like they're so nervous that they can barely even speak. This does not look like the sort of person I would want to be in charge of my ward or my hospital or my operating theatre if something difficult happened. Do you see what I'm saying? I want to see good eye contact. I want to see a good solid voice. You even look at me here, you know, my gestures that I use. Many interviews these days are now happening by Zoom or by Teams. So even with a small little video, you can get across power, you can get across strength, you can get across your messaging. This is important, my friends. So beware of that. Your body language really does matter. So let me go back to sharing here, and people saying, you know, well, Conor, I can be a bit nervous. Yes, we can all certainly be a bit nervous sometimes, but nonverbal communication matters. 93% of the impact, not the content, but the impact that you make is nonverbal. So your posture, how you sit, how you stand, your handshake, eye contact. Now, a lot of this will not happen because of Zoom or Teams and because we work in the COVID environment, right? But beware of this. So let me continue to move down here. This I find really disconcerting when Outlook freezes on you. And so let me go back again and we'll find it. So we will work here, not to worry. So bring it up on the screen again. So facial expression, gestures, pacing, body language, all important stuff. So all important to think about. Let me move on. Now let's get to questions. There are only really 3 questions that interviewers want to find out. So we call these the generic questions. Interviewers want to find out these 3 things. Number 1, can you do the job? Secondly, will you do the job? Thirdly, will you fit in? So it is very important, therefore, to listen carefully to what the interviewer wants, and then you answer with your most positive and your most relevant information. Really what you're trying to emphasize here is your relevant experience. Here is what I know. Here is what I can do. It's not just the exams that you've passed, but it's the things that I've been able to know and do. And therefore, here are the skills that I can bring to the job or to the organization. So this is important, my friends. Now, the questions can be phrased, of course, in different ways. Now, so let's have a look at this. Can you do the job can be often phrased in the following way. What are they after here? They're looking for skills, competencies, track record, experience, qualifications. These are the things they're looking for. So you may be asked things like, what interests you most about this particular post? What do you bring to the party? In other words, what skills you bring to the party? Why you over the other candidates? So for example, we are seeing 20 people today. Why will we remember you? How quickly can you make a contribution? How do you work under pressure? So these are the sort of questions that sort of give an idea. You know, is this young woman able to, you know, handle a very busy hospital environment, a very busy caseload, you know, a very reactive ED department? You know, is this young man able to handle all of the pressure that goes on in this very fast moving and many variables environment? So can you do the job? That's going to be interesting. And you want experience, track record, and explanations on that. The second thing then is, will you do the job? What they're after there is what we call personal disposition, energy, approach, commitment, motivation. So what they're looking at now is your enthusiasm, your energy. What would you do if you got the job? And this is where you're thinking, here's how I could improve it, or here's the extra skills, or here's a new clinic, you know, that I might be able to offer my services to, or here, you know, here's some of the good stuff that I think I could bring to this. Your biggest accomplishment. What skills have you acquired in the last year? You know, how are you building your bank of knowledge, and how are you continuing to build? What electives you've done? Why did you choose those electives? What is your own 5-year plan? How do you see yourself? You know, how do you see your career panning out? It is really wise to have sort of, listen, you know, here's my plan. Here's what I'm thinking of doing. Hopefully I'm going to get some experience in this area. Then I want to do some higher specialist training. Then I'd like perhaps to do a fellowship. Think about it. It doesn't have to be absolutely, you know, contractually signed up, but it's nice to meet people who have, you know, a view of their own 5-year plan and how it's going to pan out. And of course, what they are doing to make that 5-year plan happen. Now, the next one is, will you fit in? And this is to do with things like, how do you make your best contribution? If I was to call your current boss, how would they describe you? In other words, what are you like as a colleague? What are you like as a team member? If I was to speak to some of your colleagues, how would they describe you? Are you collegial? Do you contribute? Do you come in with a smile on your face? Do you roll your sleeves up? Are you able to, is your first reaction to other people is, how can I help? Am I a good team player? That's what people want to see. How do you handle difficult people? Medicine can be a very fraught discipline, and you're dealing a lot with people who are under pressure and under stress, which could be the patients, but you're also dealing with colleagues who can be under pressure and under stress. So how do you handle a difficult person or difficult people? What are you reading at the moment? What was the high point of last year? So be prepared to have some examples already teed up in your head so that you can answer those questions with some degree of fluency, and that you have an example. And I say, no, I know exactly what I'm going to say, and I know the example that I'm going to use. Finally, next point here, always professional and positive. Never argue or get upset or lose your focus. No, not at all. Polite and gracious, make your points assertively. And if you're not sure of a question, and you're not sure where the question is going or how to respond to it, ask a question just to clarify so that you are on the right track. So instead of going off and asking the question or the wrong question, ask a question yourself just to clarify so that you are of necessity then back on the right message. So here's the key thing, my friends. Stay on message. And the last point I make here is deliver with confidence. If you come across as confidence is contagious. People like confidence. They like, fluency. They like the message being delivered. If you come across as nervous or evasive, they get nervous and evasive, right? So confidence is contagious. And it's a really important part. So that's the last little image that I use on the PowerPoint. So at the bottom of the PowerPoint there, I have some contact details, but that's grand. Now, so that is sort of a broad overview. Now, let me pause a moment here, my friends, and I'm going to get rid of that. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a second document. So let me now share the screen again. And I want to share this document with you. Now, my friends, this is what we call interview skills for consultant posts. Now you're thinking to me, come on, Conor, we're not going for consultant jobs yet. Well, this is me and Frank Murray and Richard Costello sitting down one Saturday afternoon and actually me picking their brains and writing down all the sort of questions that they like to ask. So this is straight from, the key people. This is the sort of stuff that they like to talk about. So let's now go through this. And again, I can send these documents to you. I can send both the PowerPoint document and I can send this Word document. And if you want, you can widely circulate that. So if somebody wants to talk to me at the end about getting these documents so that they can be circulated and distributed, I'm happy to do that. So here we go, my friends. Some of this is a little bit repeating what I've said already, but this is not me writing this now. This is straight from Frank Murray and some of his colleagues. The key is your experience. They like to see a relaxed manner. Eye contact appears spontaneous. So all of that body language stuff is really important. Audits, what have you done and what changed in practice? So they're quite interested in audits and whatever. The improvement of patient safety, obviously. Now, the management of a difficult colleague. Notice that one because this one actually crops up, again and again. But just note that one, the management of a difficult colleague. Transformation, your role in it. Your experience of working in teams. The next one here again, conflict, the personal style of managing conflict with examples. At this point, I said to my friend Frank, I said, Frank, there seems to be a lot of stuff around conflict. And I said, is there a lot of conflict in medicine? And he says, yes, there's loads of conflict in medicine. And it's not just with the patients, he says. You really do need to be able to manage yourself in a fraught and stressed environment. Okay, moving on. Anything that I've marked and highlighted in yellow is almost immediately asked. So anything in yellow, you can pretty much bet your house on it that you're going to be asked this question particularly, or something very like this. So what attracts you particularly to this post? So let's say, for example, you were applying for the higher specialist training in cardiology. They will be asking you, well, what attracts you to cardiology? Why are you the best candidate for this post? Look at all the interviewing committee. Now, obviously, that's going to be a little bit more difficult in remote Zoom Teams format, but try and make sure that all the faces that they see you and you see them show enthusiasm, openness, and talents. If there is anything that you want to add, make sure that you give your brief summary. What you don't want to do is get back out into the car park after your interview and say, oh, God, I forgot to say this and I forgot to say that. If you feel there's something that you want to say, make sure you say it, even if it's at the end. Don't appear arrogant, okay? What skills you bring to the post? That is definitely, going to be asked. Don't say you need to do this or you need to do that. I asked Frank why he asked about this, and he said, he was interviewing one afternoon, and whatever young doctor was on the other side of the table kept saying, well, you need to do this, and then of course you'd need to do that. And if you had this sort of a patient, you'd need to do this, and then you would need to do that. And he said, it just became irritating. So he says, we stopped them. And I said, listen, nobody over this side of the table needs to do anything. We've all got jobs over here. So it was a phrasing thing. Don't be saying you need to. Continuous quality improvement, professional competence grant. What experience do you have of working in teams? In teams with consultants or just in multidisciplinary teams generally? Medicine now is very much a multidisciplinary team environment, so your ability to be a good team player and to work in teams is really important. Emphasizing the cooperative nature, work as a specialist service. Here's an interesting one. What is the area of medicine where you are least competent or confident? And of course, then, what are you doing about it in order to close that gap? Next one. When did you last ring a consultant on call? It is always interesting to hear that a young doctor is not going to do anything that is either dangerous or crazy, but is very happy to wait, to ask, to consult, to call a colleague, to call a consultant. That is important. A safe pair of hands. That's what we're interested in hearing. Do you have any current or future learning needs? Now, the next few will not be asked of a young doctor. However, often maybe at HST level, you might be asked, have you experience of developing a business or a service plan? Or indeed, as a young doctor, have you been part of a team that has implemented a new cardiac service or a new dermatology service or a new nephrology service, whatever it might be? Did you make the case? Did you prepare the plan? How have you used international best practice to influence change? In other words, is this modeled on a center of excellence? Is it modeled on something, a positive role model? Your personal style of dealing with conflict, that's repetition, but you can see how often this conflict question arises. Be certain to be seen to listen. What have you learned from audit, and how have you incorporated the learning into your practice? Okay. The next one, management of an underperforming colleague with examples. So there's the whole notion as well of, your ability to be able to manage, to manage others. Again, not so important at a junior level. But as you progress in your career, more and more questions start to be asked about your ability to manage a team and your ability to manage other colleagues. Now, observations. This is Frank Murray now, so make allowances for this. The CV needed critical tidying. You can see he's quite critical if he doesn't see the CV laid out in the format and to the precision he likes. Very nervous. The person talked for too long, so we couldn't ask all our questions. Now, listen carefully to this. Talked for too long, answers wandered around too much, far too detailed, for example, his research on hepatitis B, no time to ask all the questions. What you're learning here is too much talking is as bad as no talking. If you're talking for too long, if you're getting into the research on hepatitis B because you thought, oh, well, Frank Murray is a liver doctor. If I can tell him all about my research on hepatitis, that'll be great. I will pass the interview. No, all he needs to know is, have you done some research? What research did you do? Why did you do it? How did you do it? What did you find? Have you published? Have you been, invited to speak? Have you won any prizes or whatever? That's all he wants to know. He doesn't need a lecture on your research on hepatitis B. So that only annoys him. So talking for too long didn't allow the development of other projects. Sentences too long, points lost in the verbalizing. So my friends, this is where the rule of 3 is important. You will get extra marks, extra brownie points for being brief and being concise and getting to the point, instead of being, too verbose and too much talk. Had to be interrupted, very repetitive. The important points were not clear. So my friends, you really need to be clear. What am I saying and how am I answering this question? My rule of 3, point A, point B, point C. Thank you very much. Next question. Be quick. Don't say thank you for the question. And this is what he asked me to do. He said, put it in block letters, he says. Answer the question that was asked. Be focused. So there's no point in drifting off the topic. Answer the question that was asked. Remain focused on the topic. Okay. Last few on this one. Don't move the chair around to look at individuals. You can imagine what people do are crazy things when they are in an interview room. Plan your answers. Explain your CV. The explanation of your CV is often the first question. Usually people will be asked something like, tell us a bit about yourself, or can you explain your CV to us? This will be probed with what, where, when type questions. Fair enough. What they're doing there is they're exploring the actual contribution of the candidate. So they really want to find out where you contribute and what you've done and what you've learned. What is the area of general internal medicine where you feel least competent? Okay, so now, the key areas that they are looking for is what we call professional and related skills. So that's going to be your clinical, your professional and related skills. Lovely, they're going to ask about that, obviously. They're going to be very interested in management skills, particularly as your career unfolds. Management skills, the ability to plan and be organized. Leadership ability, the capacity for leadership and the capacity of leading a team and teamwork. They're interested in that, of course, as well. And then finally, what you'll see here is what we call the soft skills. But they're called soft skills, but really they are very, very important. In interpersonal and influencing, of which a lot happens in medicine, communication, critical thinking, innovation, creativity, problem solving, adaptability. These are all what we might call human and working skills. And more, they are very interested in that. Now, they're not going to have time in a BST interview. They're not going to have more than 10 or 15 minutes. In a HST interview, probably about 15. But so they're going to be limited, but it's very important to have a heads up on what we're doing here is think about the sort of questions that you're likely to be asked. Now, my friends, this is the nitty-gritty. This is what we call the choreography of the interview. Now, whether they have time to do all of this or not, maybe they will, maybe they won't. But this effectively is how the interviews usually unfold. And hopefully this will not be a surprise to you. The opening question is, take us through your CV. Tell us a bit about yourself. And I'd like you to write down, please. Don't literally start off with, well, I qualified in 2013, and then I've done my intern year in St. Vincent's Hospital, and then I passed part 1 of my membership and all the rest. That is just boring, and that is what everybody else kind of says. Here is what I would like you to be thinking about when they ask you about your CV or your history. What they want is a light, L-I-G-H-T, a light, interesting gallop. Now, what I mean by that is it has to be done in about 60 seconds. Tell them something interesting. Don't get into details. Because if you start getting into details on your research or your, your electives or your teaching or your stuff, then you are using stuff that you are going to need later in the interview. So all you do at the start is make it light, interesting. And what's interesting about a person is not just what they did and when they did it and where they did it. What really makes things interesting is about why they did it. Why did you choose medicine? Are you from a medical family? Were you particularly gifted in school? What subjects were you like? While you were at medical college, your undergraduate years, did you excel in certain subjects? Were you attracted to certain subjects? Did you win any prizes? Did you win any gold medals? Why has your career panned out the way it has? And then what else do you do when you're not being a doctor? Do you play football? Do you coach the basketball teams? Are you a great cook? Do you play the violin? I don't know. But these are the sort of things that make a person interesting. So make yourself interesting at the start of your interview. Now, the next one is a real interesting question. Why are you interested in this job? And that's where, again, the rule of 3 can be very useful to you. Why have you applied, or why are you interested in this job? In other words, let's say, for example, I am applying for the HST in gastroenterology, or I am applying for dermatology. Why are you interested in this job? Why are you applying for this? And what you want to be able to say is, I believe, there are 3, and this is back to the rule of 3. I believe there are 3 things that really make a good gastroenterologist or a good cardiologist. Or I believe there are 3 things that really mark out a great dermatologist. A, whatever it might be, I'm good at this. B, whatever it might be, I'm good at this as well. And C, whatever it is, I am very good at this. So in other words, so that you show them, you really understand what the job is about, because you're able to describe to them, here are the talents, the skills, and the abilities that are needed for cardiology or dermatology or whatever. And I am good at these things. That's why I'm interested in this job. So it's an interesting way of positioning your answer here. That's why I'm interested. That's what attracts me to this job. Then they will actually roll their sleeves up and they will start talking about your skills. This is a chance to show off. Talk to us about your general medical skills, they might say. So what clinical skills have you got? And certainly in the early stages, they will want to hear things like, since I qualified, I've been lucky enough to work in some very busy hospital environments. I have been in St. Vincent's, I have been in Limerick, I have worked in the emergency department, I have held the stroke bleep, I have dealt with, MIs, I have dealt with, in a busy emergency department, I've dealt with slips, falls, car crashes, all sorts of different trauma. I've been able to deal with some of the complex presentations that people are coming into this hospital. I'm not the finished article, of course I'm not. I'm a new young doctor, but already I have learned and I've been complimented on and I have built some solid general medical skills. So that's how you want to answer that one. I'm a safe pair of hands. I'm learning all the time. I'm doing the good stuff, Then any specialist skills that you might. Now, early in your career, you won't need the specialist skills because you may not even have chosen your specialty at this stage. But if you are doing something like gastroenterology, they will therefore also want to know then, well, okay, how are you on endoscopic, have you done any endoscopic ultrasound, cardiology? Have you done, any echocardiographs? Have you done angiograms? So if it's a specialism that you were applying for, then you need to be able to show off and say, here are some of the skills already that I am learning. Here are some of the electives I've done, and here are some of the specialist skills that I am starting to build up. So you need to be able to give them examples of both your general medical skills and your specialist skills, if that is relevant to the interview that you're applying for. The next element is research. And in fact, let me divide that down into 2. There is both research and then there is audit, because there's really kind of 2 types of questions here. Have you been involved in any research? Talk to us about your research. Again, you might have done 6 pieces, you might have done 12 pieces, you might have done 18 pieces of research, right? However, yes, as you can see from my CV, I have done quite an amount of research and I've been first author, I've done something. But here are 3 examples that I would like to share with you. You won't have time to go through the 3, but you need to pick 3 examples of research and have them ready in your head so that you can talk about them, that they are relevant to this interview. In other words, you know, I have done literature reviews, I've done lab-based research, I have done, you know, comparison of cohort groups or whatever it might be. I've pulled case study, you know, and I've really seen them. So I know how to do research. The next example beside that will be then audit. Have you been involved in audits? And again, you need your couple of examples to have it ready. Yes, I've been involved in a few audits. Here is 1 or 2 or 3 that I can particularly focus in on. Time is short. You'll probably only be able to describe 1, but pick a good one that makes you look good. So that's what we're talking about here. The next one is teaching. Now, it is hard at an interview to say something really extraordinary about teaching, but if, on the other hand, that you know, somebody has asked you to do some extra teaching, not just preparing, you know, undergraduates for their exams, or, you know, some of the interns or some of the bedside tutorials, everybody does that. But if you've been involved in developing a curriculum, or you've helped with, you know, pioneering a new course, or you've come up with new ways of getting something across, you know, that is quite useful. If obviously you've been chosen as a clinical tutor, well, somebody thinks you're pretty good at it, so that's useful to say as well. So my friends, it's hard to say something really bright and new about teaching, but everybody's going to be asked about it. So have something at least that, you know, makes you look half reasonable, half good about it. Now, the next one then is management. Now, a lot of young doctors literally crash and burn when they are asked the question about management. So let me say this to you. This is what a lot of young doctors will say when I ask them about, okay, talk to me now about your management skills. Management. Well, I've done a course on management. I did some management and leadership training. And I'm on a committee in the hospital, the non-consultant hospital doctor committee, and that's management. And I've also helped to prepare the rotas. I do the rotas sometimes, so that's management. Stop. That's not management at all. What is management, my friends? Management is the art of getting stuff done. Somebody who's able to get things done. That doesn't matter whether you're running a hospital, or you're running a restaurant, or you're running an airport, or you are running a concert hall. You know about management. Management is the art of getting things done through other people. In other words, it's mobilizing the team. It's getting stuff done. So if you're going to talk about management, you have to be able to describe yourself as, I am somebody who has a plan. I know how to plan. I think ahead. I am very organized. I'm organized in my own personal life. I'm organized in my sport. I'm organized in my family. I plan the holiday. I plan that, you know, I make sure that we're all ready and we're in the airport at the right time. We've all got the right tickets and the money's been put aside and the hotel is booked and all of that. I plan ahead. I am organized. I make sure everybody in the team is organized. They know what to do. And people might say, well, where have you done this stuff? I do it in my ward rounds. I do it in the clinics. I try and bring planning and management and organization. So under management, the 3 words you need to get across there is plan, organized, control. And, you know, if you stop to think about it, that really is what management is all about. If you want to score extra points, you can then also talk about leadership. But leadership is not just management. Leadership is the ability to be able to move somebody to the next level. It's like Jurgen Klopp arriving to Liverpool. Liverpool had not won the league for 30 years. So what do? They bring in a leader. Now, they call him a manager, but in fact this is somebody with, and here are the key words about leadership, a vision, a vision of excellence. So a vision of medical excellence, a vision of excellence in cardiology, a vision of excellence in nephrology, a vision. Somebody who can inspire the team. So that's not manage the team, it's to inspire the team, to lift them to the next level. Who leads by example? So somebody who leads by example, which is a great player on the field, or somebody who actually is first in the door, you know, if somebody leads by example and who motivates the team, gives them feedback and is an encourager. So that's what we want in a leader. And that's great. If you can do that as well, that and added that to your management stuff, that is really terrific. Now we are looking, that's the sort of person. I worked recently with somebody who was going for a job in Limerick down in our Midwest. And she said to me, listen, Conor, she said, I have a husband and 3 sons. And she said, I run the house to a plan. My house is planned, it's organized and controlled. When I leave at 7:15 in the morning, my husband and my sons know the plan for the day. And when I get into the hospital, my team know the plan for the day. So our clinics, our ward rounds, you know, and all of this, the important stuff that needs to be organized in a hospital. So, as I said, whether it is, you know, a cardiology clinic or it's the cath lab or it's, you know, ward rounds, both in the morning time or the evening time or a busy department, how is it managed and how is it led? So there you go. Now, the next one then is you want your relevant and powerful examples. We've seen that. Now, what would you do if you got the job? That can sometimes be phrased as, what is your 5-year plan? So in other words, if you are successful today to get onto the BST, and indeed maybe if you are successful in a couple of years' time to get onto the higher specialist training, what is your 5-year plan? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? How do you see this working out? And it's very important that you don't just, oh, well, you know, I hope to get on the HST and, you know, I'd hope maybe to do some further research and I'd like to do a fellowship maybe in the UK perhaps, or maybe in America or in Canada. I'd like to do that. And I'd like to do maybe some further areas of research. And I'd like perhaps to do a formalization of my medical education. That's all just, I'd like to do this, I'd like to do that. Yeah, that's just hopeful. I'd like to win the lottery. No, I intend, you know, applying for cardiology. I will be doing electives over this period. I will be attending. I will be passing these exams. I will be doing a fellowship. Here is where I would hope to do that fellowship. Here is the research that I am very interested in. Here's the sort of stuff that I would hope to investigate and publish, and perhaps even do an MD or a PhD. Here is the finessing of my management and leadership skills that I intend to work on over this period. And I intend to grab all of this, and then in 5 years or 6 years or 7 years or 8 years, I will be applying for a consultant position in a university hospital somewhere, you know, whether the UK or Ireland or Addis Ababa, it doesn't matter a damn, where, you know, how you see your career unfolding. Now, my friends, let's look at the second last one there. Why you over the other candidates? Now, this is interesting. Towards the end, if they've time, they may ask you this. They may say, we are seeing 10 good people today and there are 4 places, or we are seeing 20 good people today and there's 10 places. Why will we remember you? Now, a good way of answering this question is to say as follows. I hope that over the last 15 minutes, I have shown you, A, can I do this job? Can I apply for the BST? Can I apply for the HST? Can I, you know, am I academically strong? Can I pass my exams? Am I able to learn quickly? Do I, you know, implement and practice those skills? Yes, I do. I am really good at this, and can I do it? Not a question. B, will I do it? Will I do this job? This is my path. This is my plan. I have shared with you already my 5-year, 6-year plan. I will not be changing my mind. I will be bringing my enthusiasm, my motivation, my commitment, and my energy to this. I will be bringing 150%. I will not be changing my mind. I will complete this with style and make you proud. And finally, will I fit in? Point C. Again, you can see the rule of 3 happening here. Will I fit in? I'm a good colleague. I'm a team player. I'm a contributor. Anywhere I've worked, they want me back. Anywhere I've worked, I've made a contribution, and I hope for these reasons, these 3 reasons, that you remember me and choose me for the scheme. Now, the last thing that you can see on the screen there is what's called the curved ball and topical questions. Now, they're just the ones out of left field. Sometimes it depends on who's on the interview panel. It depends on topical questions, you know, questions about COVID, questions about clinical governance, questions about sláinte care, which is the policy on healthcare in Ireland. If it's in, if you're applying for jobs in Ireland, they'll probably ask you things like sláinte care. So that's one of, you know, you need to be kind of thinking about, well, what might be the possible curveball and topical questions. But here's a question that you will be asked. How do you handle difficult people? How do you handle difficult situations? And really what you want there is you want to be able to say, I am fair, but I'm strong. I will be always guided by patient safety and patient care. But if I have to manage a colleague, or if I have to call a colleague into question and I have to comment on something that they're doing, I am not afraid. I am courageous. I describe the situation. I give my facts. I give my evidence. I will explain the effect of what that other person is doing or the effect they're having on the patient. And I will express how I feel. I'm not aggressive, but I will express how I feel. And then I would hope to negotiate a fair solution. If I can negotiate a fair solution, brilliant, and happy days, and the problem is resolved and we can work together. If not, I would be prepared to say, I would like to get this thing sorted out, but if we can't get it sorted out, I would have to be escalating this to the higher authorities. I would have to escalate it to my consultant. I would have to escalate it to the clinical director. And I don't want to do that. I would much rather that we sort this thing out together. Now, obviously, that's if you're working with a colleague. But obviously, being able to handle yourself interpersonally, you know, managing yourself with assertiveness, not with aggressiveness and shouting and screaming, always collegial, always looking for a solution, always calm, never losing the head. That's the message you want to get across in terms of interview. So, my friends, they are some of the elements that we would be covering, and these are the things I would recommend to you from a from the point of view of. Now, let me just close that one out here. Now, so let me now go back to the happy, smiling faces that I see in front of me here. Hopefully now you've been making some notes, and maybe indeed some of you might have a couple of questions. So I'm more than happy now, if you want, to answer any questions. Oh God, I see a whole load of stuff. I've just switched on the chat box, my friend. They're all here already. Oh God. Now, some of these I will be able to answer, I hope, and then some of them I'll probably be done. Can I repeat the discussion on leadership? Yeah. Leadership is all about vision, the vision of excellence, inspiring the team, leading by example, giving feedback. And in many instances, giving feedback is being an encouraging person, bringing your team on, and sometimes giving the negative feedback, you know, giving people a bit of negative feedback to correct them. You have to be strong in being able to do that. So hopefully that's useful to you. If I have not done research, how could I answer it in a good way for interview? Well, now come on now, right? You know, the minimum you need to be doing is doing a bit of research. If you feel the interview is important and if you feel that job is important, it is really important to ask colleagues, maybe even visit the hospital, maybe even find out who is going to be doing these interviews, and talk to some of your own individual colleagues and say, listen, you know, what's their favorite topic? What has been asked before? You know, please do research. If you just arrive up and you're not prepared, you're going to really struggle to come up with answers. But if you have thought about what answers and what questions are coming, well, then that's going to be much more useful for you. Again, let me look at a few more of these. How can I answer the ethical and professional questions? Ooh, that's an interesting one. Ethical and professional questions. Well, I mean, for me, the whole business is this, and remember, I'm not medical. I come to this from a corporate background, so you will be much more stronger you'll be much more stronger on ethical questions than me. But I think a key point always is, you know, the first and foremost ethical question is, do we care for the patient? Is the patient safe? Is the patient? So in other words, you're placing value on the patient and how we look after the patient. Frank Murray, my friend, said one of the key things he discovered that was very useful to him when he was talking to people, and there'd be different discussions and everybody's shouting and everybody's getting very stressed. The question he would ask is, why are we here? Why are we here? We are here to help the patients. Now, let's start from that, and together then let's see if we can come up with an answer. Why are we here? How to answer the clinical cases with the big difference between our country and the Ireland system? Well, I don't know. You know, you're going to be much more, but you need to be aware. What is the Irish system? And indeed, what is the system and how it is compared? You know, are there different interventions? Is there different technology available? Is there different level of training available? I don't know. So these are not questions that I can ask so easily, because these are particularly, you know, you're asking me stuff to do with medicine as opposed to things to do with interviews, if you know what I mean. Sorry to pop it in here. Is this being recorded? Yes, it is being recorded. Is the PowerPoints going to be available? Yes, I will make sure that the PowerPoints are going to be available. Yeah, okay. Now, not done the research. How would you answer a question from the, hang on. Yeah, a change from psychiatric to BST medicine. Okay, psychiatry. Well, you know, I actually talked to a young woman this morning who was applying for HST, and she was applying for the HST in gastroenterology. But at some point in her gastroenterology, early part of her rotations, she decided, oh, hang on a minute here, maybe I would do GP. And she went off, and for a year, she did GP training. And she was honest, and she said, listen, how would you ask the question? I missed gastroenterology. I missed the engagement. I missed the challenge. I missed the procedures. I missed the hand skills. If you're going to be answering a question, answer always with authenticity and honesty. If you're going to change from psychiatric to BST medicine, say, listen, you know, I've a nephew who did pure science in Trinity College and then said, no, I thought I was a scientist. I thought I was pure science. But when it was presented to me that I was going to be working perhaps in a pharmaceutical company or in a lab, I missed patience. I missed the interactive, I missed the passion. I missed the engagement. I missed the emotional connection with the patients. And that's effectively what you have to be able to say. You have to answer the questions honestly. Don't be making up stuff, because your body language will give you away. Always be honest. It's much, much easier to be honest and to say, here's the reason why I'm changing. I believe, having dealt with psychiatry and I've worked there, that I'm not fulfilled. I believe I have more to give, and this is where I believe I can give more. My son actually came back to me, did 4 years of marketing, and then in college, and then went off and did work, and came back to me about a year ago and said, Dad, I can't do this marketing stuff anymore. And I said, okay, there's a surprise. 4 years at college and 2 years of work, and I can't do marketing anymore. I said, what are you thinking of doing? Engineering. Now, do you know what I think that is? I think it's brave to be able to say, listen, you know, I went down a road. It's not for me. It is not my passion. I want to do something that I'm passionate about. And I think that's the way to answer it. Be honest. Be honest. So, my friends, let me bring this to a conclusion. I'm seeing some thank yous, and you know, I'm delighted with hopefully being over 43 years. Will that put a negative impact on the interview? No, it won't. No, it won't. If you're good enough, I don't care what age you are. If it's a bad interviewer, it might. But if it's a good interviewer who actually knows talent, and the trick is, look at all of that extra knowledge. Look at all of that extra life skills that I bring. Look at the things that I've learned in that extra 20 years. This is what I can bring. And I think it is going to make me a better doctor, or it's going to make me a better whatever. That's the way. Be honest, my friends. Be honest. Okay, listen. Any, I don't know whether there's any last ones to be asked, but I'm going to draw it to a conclusion here. I hope you have found it useful. The feedback seems to be very positive. I want one of you to contact me by email if you can, and I will email you both the Word document and the PowerPoint document. So then in turn, you can send it to me. So hang on a minute here. If I just pick up, let me pause a moment here. Let me open the document for you so that just in case you don't have my email, I will put it on the screen. So I will finish then with this point. So, okay. Now, so my friends, sharing the screen. There we go. Now, so if anybody wants to contact me either on that number, or whoever wants to contact me on that email so that I can share with you some nice person might say, I will contact you and I will circulate it. So there you go. All right, my friends, hopefully that has been useful to you. Hopefully you've got something out of it, and I would wish you all the very best in your interviews that are coming up, and both here and overseas. So thank you one and all, and I will wave you all goodbye.
All right, thank you, Conor, for this. Was very useful, much appreciated. Very good 1 hour. I hope everyone enjoyed it as I did. I think there is a message just from Amira here. She said she will contact you to get the PowerPoint and the Word document.
Oh, excellent. Good, good.
Circulated.
Well, I will send, in fact, I have her email address anyway, so I can send that directly to her now. So that's great.
Excellent, excellent.
Lovely. Okay, my friends, best wishes, and thank you all.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
See you now. Bye-bye.